What if the chaos isn't chaos at all? What if what looks like recklessness is actually a response to structural decline? For 70 years, the global system revolved around one simple reality. The United States was highly productive. After World War II, America accounted for nearly half of global industrial output. It manufactured the steel, the cars, the machinery, the consumer goods. It exported capital, it exported technology, and it also exported stability. The system built at Bretton Woods Conference worked because America could afford it. The dollar became the reserve currency. The US Navy secured trade routes. Institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank stabilized weaker economies. Security guarantees flowed through NATO. But that architecture assumed something critical. The center of gravity would remain economically dominant. However, it didn't. By the 1970s, manufacturing began drifting outwards. By the 1990s, globalization accelerated it. By the 2000s, America was no longer the factory of the world, it was the consumer of the world. Trade deficits became permanent, debt replaced surplus, financial engineering replaced industrial scaling. This is the structural backdrop that produced Donald Trump. His approach makes no sense if you believe America is still the indispensable economic anchor, but it makes uncomfortable sense if you assume the opposite, that America is overextended, overstretched, and subsidizing a system that no longer feeds it proportionally. Look at the numbers. The US runs chronic trade deficits. It finances global liquidity by exporting dollars. It maintains hundreds of overseas military installations. It backstops financial crisis, from 2008 to pandemic stimulus. Every time volatility spikes, capital runs into US treasuries. That safe haven status sounds like a privilege, but it's also a burden. Being the anchor currency means absorbing global shocks. Trump's beliefs are different. He sees alliances not as values but as a cost centers. He sees treaties as liabilities. He sees predictability as leverage lost. When he pressures NATO members to increase defense spending, it's not rhetoric about fairness. It's a signal that America will not bankroll continental security indefinitely. When he slaps tariffs on imports from China, he isn't just targeting trade imbalances. He is challenging the idea that supply chains should optimize for global efficiency over national resilience. When he questions multilateral frameworks, he is attacking the premises that the United States should continue underwriting a rules-based order that diffuses power away from itself. This isn't traditional conservatism, it's contraction strategy. Empires historically decline in one of two ways: slow bleed or strategic retreat. The slow bleed looks stable, it maintains commitments, it preserves institutions, it avoids disruption. But over time, obligations accumulate faster than the productive capacity. Strategic retreat, on the other hand, is loud, it shocks markets, it frightens allies, it creates uncertainty, but it reduces long term exposure. Trump's lean towards the second path. Unpredictability becomes an asset. If allies doubt automatic protection, they spend more. If adversaries doubt automatic restraint, they hesitate. Volatility becomes leverage. Critics interpret this as impulsiveness. Supporters see bargaining tactics. But structurally, it reflects a calculation. The United States can no longer be the global shock absorber without weakening internally. There is another layer most discussions ignore: demographics and fiscal math. America's entitlement spending is rising. Interest payment on federal debt consume a growing share of the budget. Infrastructure needs are domestic. Political polarization reduces consensus for foreign sacrifice. The post-1945 moral narrative about defending democracy and spreading liberal norms becomes harder to sell when middle-class wages stagnate. Global leadership works when domestic voters feel prosperous. It fractures when they feel squeezed. Trump's message to the electorate is simple: why are we paying to secure trade routes for countries that run surpluses against us? Why are we defending wealthy allies who spend less on their own militaries? Why are we rebuilding war zones while towns at home decline? You can disagree with his tone, you can disagree with his framing, but the question resonates because economic asymmetry is visible. The deeper argument isn't about ideology, it's about sustainability. The dollar's reserve status gives Washington enormous power, sanctions, liquidity control, influence over capital flows. But it also requires open markets, deep deficits, and financial openness. That structure benefits Wall Street, but it doesn't always benefit industrial labor. Trump's tariffs weren't just protectionism, they were an attempt to rebalance leverage. In a hyper-globalized system, the country most integrated is also the most exposed. Tariffs introduce frictions, and friction slows dependency. His skepticism towards global institutions signals something else. Multilateralism distributes decision-making, but when relative power declines, distributed systems lock in disadvantage. Breaking them resets negotiation power. It's disruption as renegotiation. And then there's war. Post-Cold War interventions often followed a pattern: conflict, regime change, reconstruction contracts. Defense spending remains one of America's largest discretionary outlays. Trump's transactional framing, treating allies and conflicts in financial terms, reflects a shift from ideological missions to cost-benefit calculus. He always questioned why the US should act as a global policeman without direct compensation. That framing unsettles the world which is used to automatic American intervention. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Much of the modern global order rests on assumption that America will step in when system wobbles. Remove that assumption and uncertainty spikes. Markets reprice risk, regional powers arm faster, trade blocs fragment, supply chains regionalize, currency diversification accelerates. The fear surrounding Trump isn't only about personality, it's also about exposure. If America stops underwriting stability at prior levels, then who replaces it? Because China lacks the financial openness to replicate dollar dominance. European Union lacks unified military capacity and emerging powers lack scale. So the system hangs in a delicate balance, too dependent on the US to function without it, yet increasingly costly for the US to maintain it. Trump's strategy, which is quite straightforward, is this: detach from an inflection point, reduce commitments, extract concessions, shorten supply chains, increase domestic bargaining power, and force others to pay for their own security costs. It's not about burning the house down for spectacle, it's about refusing to keep paying the utility bills for everyone else. Of course, there are risks. Retreat can trigger miscalculation. Unpredictability can erode trust faster than it builds leverage. Tariffs can increase domestic costs. Weakening alliances can create power vacuums. Strategic contraction can accidentally accelerate the very decline it seeks to manage. History is filled with powers that miscalculated the timing. But from a purely structural perspective, Trump's posture reflects an assessment that the golden era of uncontested American dominance is over, and the systems built for dominance don't adapt easily to parity. The global order was never purely moral. It aligned morality with American economic strengths. Free trade expanded because US industry led. Security guarantees expanded because US physical capacity allowed it. Institutions flourished because Washington could fund and influence them simultaneously. When strength narrows, then generosity also narrows. What we are witnessing may not be destruction of its own sake, but renegotiation under pressure. A world which was addicted to a predictable hegemon now faces conditional engagement. Allies must calculate costs, rivals must calculate unpredictably, and markets must price uncertainty. That feels like instability, but it may simply be transition. If the old system required America to run deficits so others could run surpluses, to provide security so others could free ride, to open markets so others could export, then contraction was inevitable once domestic tolerance eroded. Trump accelerates that timeline. He compresses what might have been a gradual adjustment into a visible friction. He turns polite diplomacy into transactional bargaining. He replaces consensus language with zero-sum framing. History will debate whether that acceleration was necessary or reckless. But one thing is clear: the post-1945 architecture assumed a level of American surplus, economic, military, political, that no longer exists in the same proportion. And when surplus fades, then so does patience. So the turbulence you see, like trade wars, alliance tensions, institutional skepticism, may not be random. It may be the sound of a superpower recalculating its exposure, not ending the world, but questioning whether it can still afford to carry it. If you found this insightful, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.